The storm hammered the glass on the 42nd floor. Rain ran like silver rivers across the windows. Inside the conference room, a young woman named Zara stood in worn sneakers facing billionaire Harrison Caldwell. He laughed at her claim, and the sound cracked through the air like breaking glass. She did not flinch. She lifted a faded photo of her mother Lydia beside a younger Harrison. Both smiling, she said she wanted no money, only truth. Security shifted near the door. Yet she stayed still. She set a DNA kit on the table and asked for one simple thing, a test to end 18 years of questions. For a heartbeat, his eyes changed. Then the mask returned. The guards waited for his order. The rain grew louder. He had built an empire on decisions. Now one decision would show the kind of man he really was. Months later, after the dust and headlines, after the paper that said probability near certain, Zara walked across a campus lawn with a borrowed gown and careful steps. The morning air smelled like wet cedar from last night's rain. Her hands shook, not from fear but from the weight of the road behind her. Foster homes and night classes, and early shifts at the cafe. The same small cafe where she had once counted coins to buy the test that changed her life. People waved and smiled. They did not know the whole story. They only saw a graduate who had learned how to keep going. He arrived early and sat in the back at first, the billionaire with the tired eyes and a tie that did not quite sit right. He had lost a title at his company, lost a few friends who loved the spotlight more than the truth, lost a version of himself that had been all shine and no center. Yet as he watched her take her seat with the other students, he felt richer than he had ever felt in any boardroom. His hands were not steady. He held a small box in his pocket, a gift saved for the right moment. When her name was called, the cheers rose. Not loud like a sports arena, gentle and proud like a family porch after sunset. She walked to the stage with the calm of someone who had known harder floors and quieter rooms. He stood without meaning to, and felt his chest pull tight. It was not about blood alone. It was the courage she carried, the way she had asked only for truth and then held herself to it, even when cameras circled and strangers tried to make a show out of her life. She crossed the stage, and for a second their eyes met. A nod, a promise that did not need big words. After the ceremony, they found each other by the old oak, the one with benches smoothed by many years of waiting parents. He tried to speak, and the words tangled. I am proud. I am sorry. I am here. All of it pressed together. She smiled and helped him breathe. They had practiced this. Small steps, simple plans. Coffee first, then a walk. No headlines, no grand speeches, just two people learning a language they should have known long ago. He handed her the box. Inside lay a small silver locket, a little worn. He had polished it by hand the night before. Inside the locket, she found a tiny photo of a sleeping baby, a face like a sunrise she had never seen until now. She told him about her next path, pre-med, long nights, a goal to build medicines that people on tight budgets could actually reach. She did not want to be the hero in a headline. She wanted to be a steady hand in a clinic where the lights sometimes flicker. He listened without checking a phone, without looking over her shoulder toward a car or a camera. He asked questions the way a father asks when he is ready to learn, not to lead. What do you need? How can we plan? Who can we call for the best books? She answered with a plan drawn in a thrift store notebook, dates and steps and deadlines written in neat lines. They walked to the cafe that had held so many. Of her early mornings, the bell on the door rang a small happy note. The owner brought 2 cups on the house, the same corner table waited like an old friend. There was a picture on the wall now, a black and white of Lydia on stage in a small club long ago. Someone had found it in a box of local history. The room seemed to hold its breath. He stood before it and closed his eyes, not to run from the past, to feel it fully and let it teach him how to be present now. His son and daughter arrived a little later. They kept things gentle, no big introductions, just a shared plate of warm pastries and small talk about classes and music and a weekend hike. Zara laughed at a story about a broken violin string and a sprint to a school stage. The sound was light and real, the kind of laugh that grows only when people feel safe. No one tried to define roles with labels. They let respect go first. They let time do its work. Outside the window, the city moved. Buses sighed, the sky cleared. The day did not need grand endings. It needed honest ones. Evening came and they walked by the water where street lamps drew golden paths on the surface. He told her about the first small fund he had started since stepping down, focused on clinics and labs that priced for need rather than status. She told him about a professor who believed she could lead a trial one day. They did not promise a perfect path. They promised to call when things got hard, to show up for small wins, to tell the truth even when truth cut. At the apartment door, she turned and said the words she had carried since that storm room. I wanted the truth, and I got it. Now I want a life that honors it. He nodded and answered with the only vow that mattered. I will be here not just today, again and again, and she stepped inside and held the locket and felt the quiet strength of two names resting together. Washington and Caldwell, past and present, sorrow and hope. None of it erased, all of it woven into a future she would write with steady hands and an open heart. The rain of that day did not start in the boardroom. It started in Zara's chest the night before, when the city hummed and the cafe closed and the mop left a clean shine on the floor. She counted her tips, rolled the bills with careful fingers and slid them into a small envelope marked for the lab she had saved for months, skipping bus rides and walking home, skipping new shoes and fixing old ones with glue, cutting coupons, saying no when friends asked her out. Not because she was joyless, because purpose held her steady like a hand at her back at home, a room above a noisy street that smelled of garlic and rain. She opened the box that held her mother's things, a faded photograph of Lydia on a tiny stage, a lipstick print on a napkin folded like a love note, a letter written in soft blue ink, the paper thin with time. His name is Harrison. She had written, he works hard and dreams harder. He does not know about you. The words were simple, not angry, not begging, only asking the future to carry truth to a child. Zara read the letter again, then pressed it flat and slid it back into its sleeve. She touched the photo of the young man beside Lydia, a man who looked like he could write code till morning and still walk her home at sunrise. She whispered a promise to the woman who could not answer. I will ask for the truth and only the truth, not a cent more. She packed a manila folder with copies of everything, birth records with father listed as unknown, hospital notes that marked a faint genetic sign that matched a line in an old medical article with the Caldwell name, articles from early tech blogs that showed Harrison in a wrinkled shirt and a grin that did not yet know cameras, a printed map of downtown with the route to Meridian marked in yellow. She laid out her clothes on the bed, not fancy, only clean and honest. A plain shirt, a borrowed blazer, the same worn sneakers that had carried her to early shifts in the dark and to late classes that made her eyes burn. She did not need a makeover. She needed her own face. She practiced her words in the mirror, not a performance, a plan. My name is Zara Washington. My mother was Lydia. I am not here for money. I am here for clarity. If a test says no, I will walk away in peace. If it says yes, I want a conversation like human beings. She practiced the pause that was not a pause, the calm breath that kept her voice from shaking. She practiced looking at her own eyes, which were dark and steady and so much like Lydia's that it made her throat ache in a way that was both pain and courage. At the cafe next morning, her manager poured her a quiet cup and said, "Take the first hour for yourself." He had seen the envelope in her apron. He had seen her study between orders. He had seen the way she straightened her back when life tried to bend it. She thanked him and sat at the corner table with a notebook, drawing boxes for steps like a lab protocol. Call the front desk. Ask for 5 minutes with an assistant if denied, then ask for the public relations office. If sent away, then wait, in the lobby with calm patience and a book. Never raise your voice, never let them define your dignity. The plan was not perfect. It was practical, and that was better because real life rarely hands out perfect. On her break, she took the bus toward downtown, the sky low and gray, skyscrapers like sober faces in the clouds. Her phone buzzed with school emails and lab reminders. She flagged them to answer later. She pressed the envelope with the kit against her chest and felt the small, hard shape of a tool that could end years of guessing. On the bus were people, with lunchboxes and work boots and tote bags with library books. She liked the bus. It reminded her that stories overlapped in cities, and that no one could guess anyone else's courage by their shoes. At the Meridian lobby, she met Cool Marble, and soft voices and the soft hiss of an espresso machine. She met a receptionist whose badge said Lou. Lou asked if she had an appointment. Zara said no, she had a letter and a photo and a request that could be answered in 5 minutes. Not by a lawyer, by a test. Lou studied her eyes, then studied the folder, then made a call. Zara waited near a high window, counting her breaths in 4s like the meditation app had taught her. Lou looked up and said, "Take the next elevator, 23 floors. Ask for Dana in executive. Admin? Be kind, she is the gate you need in the elevator." She watched numbers light up like slow stars. She felt the lift in her stomach and told herself, "This is just a building. These are just floors. Breathe in, breathe out." On 23, she met Dana, who had steady hands and a tired kindness that comes from managing big egos and small fires. Dana asked brief questions. How old? How did you get the name? What do you want today? Zara answered, with the same steady line, truth, not money, and a plan that does not turn this into a show. Dana nodded like a person who understands contracts and also understands hearts. She said, "Wait here." She disappeared behind a glass door. When she returned, she said, "Come with me. He has 10 minutes, maybe 15, if we are lucky." They walked a long hallway lined with awards that gleamed like coins. Zara did not look left or right. She watched the floor, felt the soft bite of her sneaker soles, and told herself that dignity walks quietly. Inside the conference room, the city stretched behind him like a moving painting, thunder far away like low drums. Harrison turned, and his face flashed a dozen thoughts before it settled. Defense habit training. He gestured to a chair. She did not sit. She did not want to look smaller than the moment asked. She placed the photo on the table. Lydia's smile lit the space like a small lamp, and the air changed. His laugh came not because he was cruel by nature. It came because fear often wears the mask of humor when a life is about to tip. The sound bounced hard off the glass and hit her. She did not step back. Not 1 inch. She said the line she had practiced. "I want no money. I want the truth." Security shifted at the door like chess pieces waiting for a move. She lifted the kit, so he could see it clearly. A small vial and a sealed swab. Nothing dramatic, only science, only clarity. His eyes flicked to the photo again, lingered on Lydia's mouth, returned to Zara's eyes. For a beat, the room fell into a softer light. Then his guard face returned, a habit built by years in rooms where weakness costs millions. She opened her folder and laid out the clean facts, the birth record, the hospital note with a family marker, a copy of Lydia's blue ink letter meant for him years ago but never delivered. The lines that said, "I am not asking for your money. I am asking you to know she exists." The words pulled a muscle memory across his face, the kind you cannot fake. He reached out but did not touch the paper. A guard coughed. The rain climbed from steady to hard and wild. She could feel her heart, but her voice stayed level. "I work. I study. I pay my way. I am not here to take. I'm here to meet truth in daylight." He told security to stand down with a small motion, barely a flick of his hand. He looked at Dana, then at the kit, then out at the city that had given him power and hidden his past. He said, "If we do this, we do it right." Legal present, a chain of custody, a witness from HR, no leaks. Dana was already moving, a plan in motion. Within minutes, a company attorney entered with a clipboard and a calm face. An HR manager with careful eyes took a seat at the end of the table. The kit lay between them like a little bridge. He rolled up his sleeve. She rolled up hers. The attorney explained the steps in simple terms. Swab, seal, sign, submit. 3 days for results, maybe less. The room breathed in and out together. Zara handed him the swab. Their fingers did not touch, yet something passed between them. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Only agreement that truth was a place worth walking toward. The swab clicked into the vial. Labels went on. Signatures followed. The attorney placed the envelope in a courier bag and locked it. Harrison leaned back as if a weight had moved. Not gone. Moved. Zara folded the letter, slid it gently back into the folder, lifted her chin, and thanked each person in the room by name. Then she left with the same quiet steps she had arrived with in the hallway. Dana caught her hand in both of hers and squeezed. "Good courage," she said. The elevator doors opened like a second chance, and the city waited below with rain that felt cleaner than before. The conference room emptied slowly. Chairs slid back. Folders clicked shut. Quiet footsteps carried legal and HR down the hall. The courier bag left like a small ship with a precious map inside. Harrison stood at the window with his hands on the glass. The rain had softened to a curtain. The city looked washed and new. He felt older and lighter at the same time. Not because anything was solved, because something honest had finally begun. Dana waited by the door, not pushing, only present. He thanked her in a voice that carried more grit than before. She nodded and said the lab would confirm receipt within the hour. She would keep the chain clean. No shortcuts. He agreed and asked for one more favor. No statements. Not yet. Let the truth arrive first, she said. Understood, then stepped out to manage the small moving parts that decide whether a day goes calm or wild. He walked to his office and passed awards on the wall that once felt heavy with meaning. Now they looked like snapshots from a life that forgot to breathe. He opened a lower drawer that most people never saw. Inside were files from his early days, rent receipts and code notes, and a folded flyer from a jazz club in Brooklyn. He ran a finger over the ink and heard a singer's voice in his chest. He sat and let the room be quiet. No calls, no screens. Just the rain and the hum of the building, and a picture in his mind of a small stage and a woman who could make a room stop by holding a note just right. Zara left the tower and stepped into air that smelled clean. She walked fast at first, then slowed, then breathed the way her app had taught her, 4 in, 4 out, feet steady on the sidewalk. She checked the time and realized her shift at the cafe started in 20 minutes. She did not call in sick. She did not need a bed. She needed the rhythm of work. She needed cups to stack and milk to steam and a line of customers to anchor the clock. When she reached the counter, the owner saw her face and said, "Take 5, then put a warm muffin by the espresso machine without making it a big thing." She tied her apron and moved into the flow. "Hello. What can I get you? That will be ready in a minute. Sugar is by the door." She smiled at a child who stood on tiptoe to see the cookie case. She offered a cup of water to a courier with damp shoulders and grateful eyes. The small kindnesses made her chest ease, not because they fixed anything, because they reminded her that she could still give even while waiting to receive. On her break, she pulled out a notebook and wrote down 3 columns. Things I can control, things I cannot, and things I can influence if I stay steady, under control. She wrote sleep, food study shift plan, under cannot. She wrote gossip timing, other people's choices, under influence. She wrote tone boundaries, follow-up questions. Across town, Harrison met with 2 people from communications. They spoke in careful phrases and asked if he wanted to prepare a holding statement. He said not yet. He said they would not deny or confirm a private test. They would not attack a young woman. They would not feed a rumor with a fight. They would talk when the lab sent facts. He asked them to write 3 drafts for 3 possible paths. No spin, only plain words that respected lives on all sides. They were surprised, then relieved. Then they left with a task they could stand behind. He called a friend who had been with him since the first office with IKEA desks and a coffee pot that never turned off. The friend did not rush into comfort lines. He listened and then asked one clear question. "When the envelope comes, who do you want to be?" Harrison leaned back and looked at the ceiling. The answer did not need a meeting or a deck. The answer had shown up in a pair of steady eyes across a table. "I want to be the man who picks up the phone and speaks to her first," the friend said. "Then get ready to do exactly that and to keep doing it on hard days too." Zara finished her shift and walked to the library. The quiet there felt strong and kind. She chose a table by a window and opened a textbook. She reviewed enzyme pathways and drug delivery models. She read slower than usual. Her thoughts kept drifting to a silver locket she had never seen, a baby picture she could only imagine, a voice that had laughed at first and then softened. She put a hand over the letter in her bag and felt the texture of the paper through the cloth. She whispered a line to the mother who lived in her bones. "I did not run. I did not yell. I stood and asked for truth. I think you would be proud." At Meridian, an email pinged from the lab. Receipt confirmed, processing started, estimated time 72 hours. Harrison stared at the number and thought of how long 72 hours can feel when your life has been built on speed. He forwarded the note to Dana and the attorney. He added one sentence: "Thank you for guarding this process with care." He did not copy anyone else. He had learned over years that not every step needs a crowd. That evening he walked through his home with new eyes. The quiet felt different. He stopped in a study and opened a music app. He searched for a song he had not heard in decades, a standard Lydia used to sing until even the waiters slowed down. He let it play. He pictured a room where she laughed with a hand over her heart. He thought about the day she might have stood in a lobby and asked a receptionist for 5 minutes. He felt the weight of not knowing her last name, the weight of a door closed by a calendar he sat and let regret be a teacher, and not a whip. Then he stood and went to the kitchen. He made tea. He texted his son and daughter to check on their homework and their day. He kept the messages simple and steady, no big reveals, just presence. Zara slept in a small room with a fan that hummed like a lullaby. In the morning she woke early and ran by the water. The sky was a soft gray that promised a clear noon. She counted her steps in sets of 10. She told herself that waiting is not sitting still. Waiting is choosing good steps while time does its work. At the cafe, a regular brought a plant cutting in a paper cup and said it was for luck. She laughed and put it on the back shelf near the dishes. She texted a classmate to share notes from a lab she might miss if calls came. She made a simple dinner of rice and vegetables and wrote a list of questions she wanted to ask if the test said yes. Questions about Lydia's favorite songs, about the neighborhood they had loved, about why leaving had happened the way it did. On the second day, the building at Meridian buzzed with a different kind of energy. A rumor turns corners faster than a person can walk. Harrison gave the same instruction to anyone who asked. We do not discuss what is not yet known. We respect privacy. We do our work. He moved through meetings with focus that surprised even him. He passed a framed family photo on a shelf and paused, not to look at himself, to look at the children, who would read the headlines if they came. He sent a message to their mother asking for a call. He wrote it with care, not to argue, to plan for their well-being, to make space for hard feelings without heat. On the third morning, a small card arrived at the cafe with no name, only 8 words written in a careful hand. Truth is a long bridge. Keep walking. Zara tucked it into her apron and wondered which customer had seen more than she said. She thought about bridges and how they are built with bolts and beams and small measured steps. She knew that when the envelope came, her legs might shake, her voice might catch. She did not need to be perfect. She needed to stay honest. Late that afternoon, the lab emailed the legal team to confirm a delivery time for the physical report. Dana texted Harrison one line, arriving 10 tomorrow. He put down his phone and let the message ring in the quiet. He walked to the window and watched clouds open to a pale blue. He thought about the first time he met Lydia, and the last time he had let himself think about her. He thought about the photo on the table and the way Zara had held her ground without poison in her voice. He knew that courage when clean can make a person want to be clean too. He wrote himself a note in his own handwriting. Call Zara before anything else. Apologize without excuses. Ask what she needs. Listen twice as much as you speak. He placed the note on his desk where no assistant could miss it. He sat for a long time, not with fear, with readiness, a kind he had not felt since the early days when a product launch meant hope and risk and real skin in the game. Zara closed the cafe and swept the floor. The plant cutting now stood in a clean glass with fresh water. A tiny green root had begun to show. She smiled and turned off the lights. Outside, the air was clear and cool. She walked home and looked up at a sky that had finally let the stars through. She felt the kind of calm that does not erase worry. It sits beside it and says, "We will handle this. One breath, one call, one step." She placed her phone on the table and set an alarm. She checked the folder once more, not because she needed more proof, because touching the papers felt like touching a thread that tied her to the woman who had loved her first morning would come. A courier would ride up glass. Elevators. An envelope would open. Numbers would sit on a page. But even before that moment, a choice had already been made in 2 hearts. a choice to meet truth without armor, to let words be simple, to let actions carry weight, to build whatever came next with care and time and the kind of dignity that needs no stage. The courier bag left the lab with its seal, and time began to stretch in ways neither of them had expected. 72 hours sounded like a number on paper, but in reality, every hour carried its own weight, each minute filling with voices, rumors, and doubts. Zara woke each morning to her phone buzzing. News alerts already circled the city. Blogs speculated about an unknown daughter of the tech giant. She had told no one, yet someone inside the building had leaked. Paparazzi waited outside Meridian's tower, cameras flashing at every dark-skinned woman who stepped through the lobby. She hid beneath a hoodie on her way to the cafe, where her co-workers tried not to stare at her with questions. She buried herself in steaming milk, cleaning counters and repeating customer orders like prayers. But inside, she carried the knowledge that the truth was already running faster than she could. Harrison felt the storm in a different way. At Meridian, the board called emergency meetings. Investors wanted assurance that the story would not affect the next quarter. His legal team whispered in corners about damage control. His wife arrived, eyes sharp as glass, demanding to know if it was true. For 15 years, she had built her life as the partner of a man whose name symbolized power and family values. Now that image shook like thin glass under rain. "Tell me this is nothing," she demanded. Harrison could not answer. He thought of Zara's steady eyes, of Lydia's letters that had never been read, of the DNA vial sealed inside the courier bag. At night, he walked through empty rooms of his mansion. The walls were quiet, but guilt pressed like heavy air. He saw photographs of charity galas and ribbon cuttings and private school concerts. All the nights he had been celebrated. He thought of the nights Zara had spent in foster care, in borrowed beds with no one clapping for her small victories. The silence in his home became unbearable. Meanwhile, Zara studied in the library. Pages open, but words blurred. She drew columns. Again, control, cannot, influence. But this time the list fought with her. Control felt thin, cannot grew longer, media, leaks, his choices, his wife's fury, the board's power. She closed the notebook and whispered to herself, "You do not need the world to believe, you only need the truth on paper. That is enough." The second day arrived with more pressure. Reporters surrounded the cafe. Customers whispered her name like it was a headline. One woman, older, left a napkin on the counter with 3 words scribbled in ink. "Hold your ground." Zara tucked it into her apron pocket and carried it like armor. At Meridian, Harrison's communications team drafted statements. Some were cold, polished, safe. He tore them in half. "We will not call her a liar," he said firmly. "We will not dismiss her until the test speaks." His tone startled the room. For once, it was not the voice of a CEO protecting numbers. It was the voice of a man trying not to fail again. That evening, his wife cornered him in the study. "Do you know what this will do to us, to our children, to everything we've built?" she asked. Her voice carried both fear and fury. Harrison looked out at the city lights and answered softly, "If she is my daughter, then everything I have built is already broken, because I built it on forgetting her mother." The words hung heavy, and she left without another word. By the third morning, the weight of the weight pressed on everyone. Outside the tower, protesters held signs about truth and hypocrisy. Inside, investors whispered about pulling out. His secretary warned that journalists had proof of Lydia's old photos, ready to air them on the evening news. Harrison closed his eyes and thought again of the manila folder Zara had laid on the table, each paper a quiet scream for recognition. In her small room, Zara stared at the ceiling fan as it spun, her hands tight around the letter Lydia had left. She whispered the same promise again. "I am not here for money, I am here for truth." She imagined her mother's voice in a jazz club, singing through smoke and late nights, and it gave her enough strength to rise. The 4th day would bring the envelope. But even before the courier arrived, both of them already knew. This was No longer about money or companies or reputation. It was about a daughter who wanted to be seen, and a father who had to decide whether he would face the truth when it knocked at his door. The fourth morning broke heavy with clouds. A courier in a gray jacket walked into Meridian's lobby, carrying a sealed envelope that seemed far too small for the weight it held. The security guards checked it, logged it, and escorted the man upstairs. Harrison was already in his office, standing by the window, tie undone, waiting for a knock. When Dana entered with the envelope in her hand, silence filled the room like a storm about to break. He sat at his desk but did not touch it right away. For nearly an hour the envelope lay unopened. His mind ran back through years. His first office with peeling paint, Lydia's laugh in a jazz club, the boardrooms where he chose numbers over faces. Now all of it pointed to this small rectangle of paper. He reached out finally, his hands, not as steady as they once were, and tore the seal. Inside was a single sheet with numbers and words. He read them once, twice, 3 times. Probability of paternity, 97%. His breath caught. He pressed his hand over his mouth as the words blurred. The woman in worn sneakers, standing against the storm, had been right. Zara was his daughter. His flesh, his blood, his failure, and maybe, if she allowed, his chance at something more. News of the delivery leaked before he had time to think. Outside the building, cameras crowded the street. Networks ran breaking banners. Investors called, panicked, demanding answers. His phone lit up with messages, directors, reporters, his wife, even old acquaintances who suddenly remembered his number. But he pushed the phone aside. The only call that mattered now was to Zara. He picked up the receiver with trembling hands. His secretary patched through the number Zara had left. The line rang once, then again, then her quiet voice answered. Hello? He closed his eyes. It's me, Harrison, your father. The word felt both foreign and true on his tongue. Silence stretched, then he heard her breath hitch. She whispered, I know, I saw the news. I'm sorry, he said, the words raw. I'm so sorry. For everything. For not finding you sooner. For not being there. For letting you grow. Of believing you were alone. His voice cracked and he didn't try to hide it. On her end, Zara leaned against the wall of her college hallway. Students walked past, unaware that her world had shifted. Anger and relief and grief swirled inside her until she could barely breathe. What happens now? She asked softly. I don't know, he admitted. But I want to try. If you'll let me, I want to be part of your life. I want to know who you are. I want to tell you about your mother, the real Lydia, not just the ghost I've carried. Her throat tightened. She had waited years for this moment, but when it arrived, it was not a fairy tale. It was fragile, uncertain, human. I need you to understand, she said, her voice shaking but steady. I'm not the daughter you might have raised. I've been taking care of myself for a long time. I won't fit neatly into your world. I know, he said, and his voice broke again. And I'm proud of you. Prouder than I deserve to be. The media storm outside grew louder, but inside that phone call, a fragile bridge began to build. He had lost control of his company, his image, maybe even his marriage. But for the first time in years, he felt something real. Hope. That evening, Zara sat in her small apartment, the letter from her mother in her lap. She thought about the man who had laughed in her face now, broken by a page of numbers. She thought about the years of loneliness, the foster homes, the night shifts. Nothing could erase them. But maybe, just maybe, something could grow beside them. She picked up her phone again, scrolled to his number, and whispered, All right. Let's see where this goes. And somewhere across the city, Harrison sat alone in his study, holding Lydia's old letter in one hand and wiping tears with the other. He had built an empire on decisions, but tonight, he knew the most important choice had nothing to do with money. It had to do with showing up again and again for the daughter who had finally forced him to face the truth. 3 days after the envelope was opened, the world outside Harrison's walls refused to calm. Reporters hounded the gates, investors whispered about reputations, and headlines shouted the same name again and again: Zara. Yet in the middle of that storm, something quieter began to grow, something that didn't belong to cameras or shareholders. Zara agreed to meet him, but on her terms. Not in a boardroom, not in a marble tower, not under flashing bulbs. She chose the cafe where she worked, the small place with chipped mugs and soft light that smelled of roasted beans. She sat in her corner booth, waiting. He walked in without bodyguards, without polished speeches. He looked almost ordinary, his suit slightly wrinkled, his eyes carrying a weight she had never seen in his public photos. When he saw her, he paused, as if the air itself asked him to slow down. The first minutes were awkward. She stirred her coffee too much, and he adjusted his cuffs again and again. But then he spoke of her mother, of Lydia's voice on stage, of how she sang Autumn in New York, until he believed the city was built just for them. His eyes softened as he remembered, and Zara found herself leaning forward, catching glimpses of the man her mother had loved before power had hardened him. They began to meet regularly, quietly, outside the noise of reporters. Sometimes at the cafe, sometimes walking by the water, sometimes in a library corner where she studied. He listened as she talked about biochemistry, about her dream to develop affordable medicine. She told him about nights she had studied under a streetlight, about the car she had once slept in during her hardest months. He never interrupted with pity. Instead, he asked questions like a student in her class, curious, humble, trying to catch up on years he had lost. But outside their meetings, the consequences grew sharp. His wife filed for separation. The board met without him, and soon his position as CEO was voted away. Investors called him reckless, journalists called him hypocrite, and society pages speculated about every move. The empire he had built cracked under the weight of scandal. Yet for the first time, he did not chase control. He let the empire fall. At home, his teenage son and daughter struggled. They had grown up with cameras at their birthday parties, with summers in gated houses, with a life where their father's image was untouchable. Now they read blogs that painted him in shame, and they saw their mother's hurt carved deep into her face. They wanted to hate Zara, but slowly, painfully, they met her. The first time was quiet, a dinner where everyone avoided eye contact, where forks clicked louder than words. But Zara asked about their hobbies, and when his son spoke about music, she smiled and said, "My mom used to hum that same piece while cooking." It was small, but it broke the ice. Meanwhile, Harrison began to change the way he worked. No longer the titan of tech towers, he redirected his energy into a smaller venture, an investment firm that supported healthcare startups focused on affordability. It was not about image anymore. It was about building something Lydia might have been proud of, something Zara could stand beside without shame. Still, not every moment was smooth. Zara sometimes pulled back, overwhelmed by the speed at which her private pain had become public drama. She reminded him again and again, "I'm not here for your money. I just wanted the truth." He reminded her in return, "And I'm here because I want to know you, not because I need to save face." Their honesty built a bridge plank by plank, even when old wounds tried to break it. 6 months later, he sat in a crowded chapel at her graduation. He was no longer CEO, no longer the golden face of Meridian Holdings. But when Zara walked across the stage in her gown, diploma in hand, his chest filled with pride heavier than any fortune he had ever counted. He clapped until his hands burned, tears slipping past his guard. And when she looked his way and gave the faintest nod, he knew it was not forgiveness he had been given. It was something rarer, the chance to keep showing up, to keep building, to keep trying. Afterward, at a small dinner in the cafe that had become their place, Zara pulled a box from her bag. Inside was the silver locket her mother had left. She opened it to show him the tiny photo of baby Zara, her eyes closed, her future unknown. He stared at it until his vision blurred. "She never stopped loving you," Zara said quietly, "even after everything." He closed the locket in his hand and whispered, then maybe it's time I learn how to deserve that love through you. For Zara, the journey was not about gaining a father in the way children imagine. It was about reclaiming truth, about standing in her own strength while allowing a broken man to step forward with her. And for Harrison, it was about learning that all the empires in the world cannot measure against one simple thing: a daughter's steady, unflinching gaze asking him to be human. 3 years passed like chapters in a book Zara had never imagined she would live. What had begun in a storm-lit boardroom grew into something layered and fragile but also real. Threads of family slowly tied together with time, patience, and truth. Zara had pushed forward in her studies with the same grit that had carried her through foster homes and sleepless nights. With the help of scholarships, her own relentless work, and one anonymous donor she suspected but never named, she entered medical school. The lecture halls were larger, the nights longer, and the sacrifices steeper, but she never complained. Each page she studied was part of her promise to Lydia, that she would not waste the life her mother had fought to protect. Harrison kept his word. He did not try to shape her path with wealth or control. Instead, he became present. He asked how exams went, brought coffee to late-night study sessions, and learned to listen more than speak. He stepped away from the glare of public life, no longer a CEO commanding thousands, but a man running a modest investment firm that supported affordable healthcare and small labs. For the first time, his work aligned with his heart. His other children took longer to adjust. At first, they kept their distance, confused and hurt by the sudden revelation of a half-sister. But Zara's quiet respect slowly drew them in. She never demanded they accept her. She simply showed up, with encouragement at their recitals, with laughter at family dinners, with humility that disarmed their resentment. By the time she entered medical school, they began to call her sister, without hesitation. The media, storm faded. Scandals burn hot but rarely last forever. What remained was not the noise of headlines, but the steady rhythm of lives being rebuilt. Harrison lost half his fortune in divorce and board disputes, yet he gained something wealth could not measure: his daughter's trust, piece by piece, moment by moment. On the day Zara graduated from medical school, Harrison sat in the front row of the auditorium. His eyes brimmed with tears as he watched her walk across the stage in her cap and gown, a smile radiant with triumph. She had chosen to keep her name as Washington Caldwell, honoring both the mother who raised her and the father who had finally found her. In her valedictorian speech, Zara's voice rang clear through the packed hall. She did not mention wealth or status. She spoke of truth, of resilience, of how love could grow in the most unexpected places. She told of her mother, a jazz singer who taught her that dignity wasn't given, it was earned through each choice, each day. She ended with words that silenced the crowd. We are not defined by the circumstances of our birth. We are defined by how we live, how we love, and how we lift others when they cannot stand alone. When the ceremony ended, the family gathered for photos. Harrison stood beside Zara, not as a titan of industry, not as the subject of scandal, but simply as a father, imperfect, humbled, grateful. He remembered the night she had stood in his office, demanding only truth, and he realized he had not just gained a daughter. He had been given the chance to become the man Lydia once believed he could be. Later that evening, in the cafe where it all began, Zara handed him a small wrapped box. Inside was the silver locket her mother had left, with the photograph of baby Zara asleep in soft arms. Harrison's tears fell onto the picture. He closed the locket in his palm and whispered, "She never stopped loving me, and you never stopped searching for truth." Zara touched his hand and smiled. And now, we build forward, not perfect, not easy, but honest. As the cafe lights glowed warm against the night, the family sat together around a small table. No cameras, no headlines, just laughter, gentle arguments, and the simple beauty of being seen. Harrison knew he had lost an empire, but in its place he had found something infinitely greater. He had found his daughter, and she had found herself. And that was enough.